Okay, so I am joined here today by three other lovely people. I've got my colleague Bridget Weedy here, who's going to be taking you through the next few slides, as well as my colleague Joyce, who will be kind of manning the Q&A for this session. So she'll make us aware of any questions that we want to stop and address, as well as my colleague Marley, who will be taking on the latter half of the presentation. But for right now, I'm going to hand it over to Bridget. I'm sorry, I'm going to take you through our agenda, which is going to start with us talking about just, message ads 101. What are all the key facts and figures you need to know? The second thing we're going to talk through is how to measure success with message ads. And the third thing will be us sharing some best practices. I think we did mention before in the email to you all that we will be following up with an email that will include a template for you guys to utilize when creating message ads going forward. So we'll be passing that on to the account teams, and then the account teams can share that with you, the people who invited you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bridget.
Thanks so much, Naomi. I see a lot of familiar faces, but also people that I don't know. So welcome so much. Great to get to know you. For those of you who don't know me, you won't know that I am a huge message ad advocate and lover. So I'm really happy to be able to do this session with you all today. We're going to start off with what message ads are, what they look like, when to use them, and then we'll really dive into how to measure success. I'll then turn over to Marley to talk you through those best practices. So message ads are an ad unit that's sent directly to a member's inbox when they're live and active on the platform. I really want to highlight that point because that means we have the member's attention when that message ad lands in their inbox. They're going to be on platform. They're going to see that nice little red indicator that they have a message, and that's really how we grab the user's attention. Message ads are a cost per send product, which means that when you're bidding on message ads, you're bidding for the amount that you're willing to send that message ad at. And that's really important when you're thinking about your bid and budget strategy. So I really want to make sure you're aware of this. This is different from our text ad or sponsored content products, which are cost per click, which means you're paying when the member clicks on that ad. So as I said, message ads are delivered to someone when they're live on the inbox. And there are two really key frequency caps I want you to take away from this session regarding message ads. So the first is members can receive only one message ad from any advertiser every 30 days. That means that when you send a message ad to a member, you own their inbox for 30 days. No other advertiser in any other vertical is going to be able to get into that inbox. And that's another reason that we see message ads are such a powerful product. The second frequency cap I want you to be aware of is around creative IDs. So a member will not receive a second impression from the same creative ID for 60 days. This was a pretty recent change for us. Typically, we had said you only need one message ad per campaign. Now with this new creative frequency cap, I'd really recommend that you have 3 to 5 ads running in any campaign at any given time to get around some of these new creative frequency caps that we have. And, the idea of this creative frequency cap is to make for the best member experience. And when our members have a good experience, their advertising typically works better. So that's a reason for this change. And 3 to 5 message ads is really what we're going to recommend to get around this creative frequency cap. And then here are just some benchmarks I want you to keep in mind with message ads. We have an open rate of around 55%, about 50 to 60%, and a click-through rate of about 3 to 5%. So as you can see, people really engage with message ads, whether it's opening it or clicking on that message ad. And we especially see that, within EDU. So now I just wanted to take you through what a message ad looks like and highlight some of the key components. So every message ad is going to have a subject line. Here you can see you're invited to join a data summit. And then we're going to get into the meat of the message ad, the body of the copy. Here you see we have 2 CTAs or call to action buttons. So here are the CTAs: register, but within education, we'll see learn more, apply now, register for a webinar. So you can definitely customize that CTA and change it based on what the message ad content looks like. You're also going to see that there's room for URLs within your message ad. So I want to highlight something here, which is if you're using the website visit or website conversion objective, you're not using a lead gen form, then please use those URLs, add those links, give our members a place to click. If you're going to be using a lead gen form with your message ad, I do not recommend including links in the body because it tends to distract our member. It gives them too many places to go. We're not being clear with what we want them to do. So website visits, website conversions, use those links, use those URLs. If you have a lead gen form, keep that message clear and just have them click on the CTA. The other thing I really want to highlight for you is our 300 by 250 banner on message ads. So this is another place for you to get your brand across, for you to grab the member's attention. What's really important here to know is if you do not utilize this ad space, if you do not include a banner in your message ad, another advertiser can take that space. So think about, you send a message ad, I'm Bridget Weedy University, and now an ad for Naomi Fink University appears in my message box. It's a confusing user experience, and it means that you haven't utilized all the real estate available. So would really encourage you to use that banner space when you can. So now that we've talked about what a message ad is and what a message ad looks like, let's talk about when to use message ads. And as you read this slide, the long story short is message ads work in a lot of different ways for EDU advertisers. So first and foremost, events, open houses, webinars, these are great ways to drive registrations. 2 points I'll call out here. If we're using message ads for some kind of event, I would give your users or your members about 2 to 6 weeks to have that copy in their inbox. So make sure you're sending these in advance so we can drive as many registrations as possible. The second note I will make here is if you're driving to some kind of third-party conversion site for registration, just make sure you can track those conversions and talk to your LinkedIn reps about the best way to do that, because we want to make sure we're able to see how many registrations we were able to drive with that message ad unit. The second thing we see work really well with message ads is prospecting. Always on prospecting works really well. As you can see, this ad unit, unlike text ads and sponsored content, you have a much larger character limit. So you're really able to talk about that return on investment for why your program and what a prospective student is going to get out of it. And we see that members really engage with this unit from a prospecting perspective. Similarly, remarketing and lead nurturing work really well with message ads because you're able to give your prospective students another message and really align to where they are in the journey. There are so many questions that prospective students have about your programs, and message ads are a great way to be able to proactively answer those questions. And with that, we'll talk a little bit about how you measure the success of message ads. So the first thing I wanted to take you through here is just how you use Campaign Manager to measure your performance of a message ad and monitor that ad performance. So the first piece here is that within Campaign Manager, you will see a drop-down of columns. The first column that's going to be selected for you is performance. That performance column will give you very top-level performance metrics for sponsored messaging. But if you really want to know more about your message ad performance, click that sponsored email on the drop-down, and you'll now be able to see such things as sends, opens, open rate, click-through rate, clicks broken down by button, banner, link. And that will really give you a much better sense of message ad performance. So really make sure when you're looking at this performance, you've selected sponsored email versus performance. It's going to give you a lot more granular data. And the second piece is if you've added a lead gen form to your message ad, switch to conversions and leads, and you'll be able to see not only the amount of leads that you were able to gain based on this message ad, but also things like lead gen form open rate, lead gen form click rate, lead gen form complete rate, etc. So this will give you a lot more information on how members not only engaged with your message ad, but also the lead gen form that's attached. And finally, if I have any of my partners on the call, they're very used to me saying this and highlighting this, but message ads have a latency impact. They have a long-term impact because they sit in a member's inbox for 30 days. So think about your own interaction when you receive a message on LinkedIn. You might look at that message on day 0, but you might not open the message or click on that message until day 7, day 8, day 28. So actually what we see is about 21% of leads come in from days 8 through 30, which means that I'd really give your message ads about 30 days of performance before you're measuring what the impact was. The other note I'll make on this is I'll have partners come to me at times and say, hey, I paused a message ad, I've spent $0, but I have 5 leads. Well, that's again because it sat in a member's inbox and they're still able to open and interact with it even without the spend behind it. And so that's why you'll really see your lead volume go up and your cost per lead go down over this 30-day period. So make sure you're giving those message ads time to perform. And I think if you do, you'll be really happy with the results. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Marley, who's going to walk us through those best practices and how to make sure our message ads are as effective as possible.
Thanks, Bridget. Hi, everybody. I'm Marley. Now I'm going to walk us through some of the best practices, as Bridget just mentioned. So first up, keep your subject line short and to the point. We always say that short and sweet is best, but also make sure that it's impactful. So we find that some of the best performing subject lines draw attention by asking a question. So keep the reader engaged and pull them in. Include your program name or company name, whatever it may be, that quickly lets them know, who they're hearing from. Also provide something unique about your program or company. So what's something that stands out that will lead them to remembering your company specifically? What can they expect to receive from your product or service? So here in this example, we can see Penn State World Campus is letting us know they offer a Master of Finance program and it's 100% online, which is super important in today's remote world. And next up, address your target audience directly. So we all know that if we see something personalized to us, we're more likely to engage and read on. So the same goes with our message ads. You can customize the message by addressing the member directly. And remember to keep the tone of the message personal and engaging. We want to avoid sounding like the message, is just being blasted to anybody, but rather to this member specifically. And you can keep it even more personalized by referring to their job title or company name. And this helps the member know that you are specifically reaching out to them for a certain reason based on their background. And lastly, try to use the word you to add that extra personal touch and to increase their engagement. And next up, be sure to give your message a unique and genuine voice. So again, keep it short and sweet and include the most important information and facts you want them to know. It's always good to use bullet points to break up paragraphs and quickly point out key facts that will keep them engaged in reading on. And also on the right-hand side of the screen, you can add the 300 by 250 banner to accompany your message. And so lastly, sign off the message from a real person at your company, which brings us to our final best practice, which is send and sign message ads from an individual. So within LinkedIn, when you're setting up a message ad, you have the option of sending from an individual at your company. So for instance, somebody from your sales team or your admissions team, or you can send from the company name. So we find that messages sent from an actual individual perform exceptionally well as they come off more personalized and warm. So there's a 16% increase in open rates, a 10% increase in click-through rate, a 10% increase in conversion rates, and a 12% increase in the click-through rate when the message ad is signed by a real person, as we can see in this example. And so those are the main best practices we wanted to highlight for you today. But of course, if you have any other follow-ups or seeking advice or guidance, your LinkedIn team is more than happy to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I know that we do have a few minutes left, so we can open up the line. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
And we had 2 questions about the deck. Yes, we will be sending this out in addition to a template for y'all to leverage for your message ads campaign.
Hi, this is Barbara Kiesler from Educational Testing Service, and I have a question about sending it out from an individual person. Can the campaign manager send it, or does the sales team have to send it if it's signed from that sales team person? How is that identified when the message ad comes through to the recipient?
Sure. So you can actually choose who that message is coming from. And basically, you can set up the sender to be whoever you want it to be. So even if the sender does not have campaign manager access, does not manage the campaigns, we can make sure that that sender is, the right person for your message for your audience. And I definitely make sure, that your sender is aligned with whoever you're sending the message from. Two things I would say about that. One, we have a really easy way to connect with our sender within the campaign manager tool. So Barbara, if you manage your campaigns, you would be able to add, your colleague into the message ad for the message ad to be sent as them. You can also contact your LinkedIn rep if you're having a hard time setting that up. And we have some kind of back-end tricks to work through as well to help you with that. But yeah, definitely encourage it coming from a sender, and definitely encourage, making sure it's coming from the right person. So, for example, is it the director of the program? Is it, in a B2B funnel? Is it the salesperson they'll be connecting with? Just making sure it feels like a consistent and cohesive process.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question from Kyle. Would there be utility to including a title with the person's name, i.e. Sarah Smith, recruitment lead? And I'm assuming this is in the head or the salutation. Bridget, do you have a guidance here?
Sure. So I typically like to do the salutation as my kind of macro for first name. And in the subject line, I usually like to pull out, what's the program, what's the offer, what's really kind of what's the catch, what's the really, really quick elevator pitch that's going to pull someone in. And then like any kind of email salutation, that's where I really like to pull in the user's first name. And then to Marley's point, I think if you have very niche or specific campaigns pulling in to say, hey, Bridget, I see your background at working in LinkedIn would make you a great fit for X program. That can work well, but we just want to make sure that our audience is well aligned to what that macro is. But to answer your specific question, I tend to use the first name macro just as that first salutation to address the individual. But great question. Thank you.
Cool. Our next question is from Marilyn. Thank you. Hello. What is the difference between conversions versus leads when it comes to the campaign reporting?
Sure, I can take that one. So conversions are going to be counted as someone who is driven to your landing page. So in a message ad example, say you have your copy and you've added 2 links to drive out to a landing page. It's typically going to be kind of your main microsite, I would imagine. It's collecting your leads information. Once they've sent that information, that's going to count as a conversion. You do have the ability to set up conversions in the tool. So you're going to be, creating all of the rules and making sure it makes sense for your campaign. But typically it's going to be someone who gives you their information on the landing page. The lead gen form, which can be attached to your message ad, will collect leads right on platform. So we tend to think and feel that lead gen forms are a lower barrier to entry on LinkedIn. You're not taken off platform to fill out these forms. All of your information is pulled from your LinkedIn profile and auto-filled right there on the site. So we typically do see higher lead volume and lower cost associated with our lead gen form. Unlike some other platforms, we actually also retain really high quality on the lead gen form. So I think it's an all-around win. You just have to make sure that you have the appropriate setup on the back end to be able to pull in those leads from LinkedIn, or you have someone who's managing the download of those leads. But message ad plus lead gen forms are kind of my magic combination. I think they work really well for education. So highly, highly recommend for those on the call to utilize lead gen forms as much as possible when you're thinking about your message ad and how to best utilize it.
Plus one to that, Bridget. If you think about like the white space in all of media, message ads on LinkedIn is really it in terms of like efficiency and share of voice. So yes, of course, adding a lead form, I'm with you on that. Thank you. So question from Gabrielle, when referring to the banner, have you seen a difference in performance when adding text overlays, neutral colors, lifestyle, like people? Great question.
Take this one and give Bridget a chance to drink some water. So I just want to call out that this banner, the real purpose of it is to keep that space 100% yours. Typically, the banner gets the lowest click-through rate within the actual message ad. So the banner is going to be on desktop only. It's a 300 by 250. We really recommend it for the purposes of branding and for, again, keeping a competitor out of that space. But typically what we see is it maybe gets a 2% click-through rate. That being said, we're always going to recommend that your creative images, are clearly relevant to the brand, that they are going to match, colors and themes that are relevant to your institution. But I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about, how to stylize it. It really serves just the purpose of a brand image for you.
Thanks, Naomi. And this is a great question. Can you edit a message ad after it's been finalized, like for future sends?
Take this one. So you can definitely go in and edit a message ad even if it's live, but obviously we can't, kind of go back and edit something that has already been sent. But yeah, absolutely. If you have a message ad campaign live, you can go in and edit any of the copy that you have entered in any of the ads.
This is actually a relatively new enhancement, so pretty exciting for us to start to be able to offer this to you. We've heard your pain points about that over the years, and now you can absolutely go back and edit.
A particular example would be that if you had a webinar that was like time-based and you wanted to update your copy and say, watch the recording versus like sign up, you can do that in your copy. And thank you, Kayla, for submitting your question. She wrote, since there is a new frequency cap where a member cannot see an ad with the same creative ID for 60 days, would you recommend A/B testing messaging from launch, say with a different CTA or different subject line?
Yeah, I think this is ideal and it's a great way of thinking. We are very, very cognizant that having multiple message ads means a lot of extra resources for your creative teams. So I always say a workaround is to just duplicate your message ad because you'll have a unique creative ID. It won't be counted as a system, but your way is the right way. It's the way we would recommend, which is test that copy, utilize different calls to action, utilize different subject lines and see what works best. That's absolutely the way the platform is meant to be used. But for those of us who feel resource constrained and for those of us who 3 to 5 ads is really a big ask, you can just duplicate the message and that will count as a unique creative ID as well. But thank you so much for calling that out. That's the right way, and please move forward that way and do it the right way.
Awesome. Any other questions for those that are on the line? How many ads should we launch at first?
I grab this one. So like Bridget had mentioned earlier, we definitely recommend, having a variation of, 4 to 5 ads is great, especially to the point of the frequency cap. We want to make sure that, we have multiple creative IDs within that campaign. We don't, particularly recommend having too many. So that's why we kind of say in that like 4 to 5 range. You don't want to have like more than 5 and a bunch of different active ads floating around, especially due to the frequency cap. But I would say that's kind of the sweet spot. And like we just mentioned, even if you have to duplicate, say you only have, kind of one copy, you can definitely duplicate 4 to 5 times.
Thanks, Marley. How can we expand B2B targeting? I've noticed company name plus job titles is a very tight audience. I'm happy to take this one. Yes, so there are perhaps about 17 different ways to reach an individual on LinkedIn, and targeting it really is our bread and butter. And oftentimes job titles is really one of our go-tos. But when you think about the targeting taxonomy of kind of our system, titles actually map up to a higher layer, which is job functions. So it's often good to deploy a strategy with titles as in one campaign and another campaign that is focused on job functions. So for example, if you're looking to go after like sales operations, business operations, professionals within like high-tech companies, those titles tend to map up to operations and consulting with organizations. So I suggest like leaning on your account team to understand how you can expand so you're not just too narrow in your kind of title focus. Alexis, hello. Thank you for your question. You asked, do you typically see a higher open rate when using a dynamic value in the subject line, such as first name? Bridget, I think you kind of touched on this. Do you mind elaborating a little bit here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And here's where I always say, like, let's A/B test it. I don't have a great stat on this. I think it's an excellent point, but when we don't have the answer, I would always say, that's a great way to run your multiple ads, right? Test those subject lines. And those are actually like pretty easy things to tweak in the scheme of things versus a whole message ad copy. So Alexis, I think it's a great idea. Not sure who your rep is, but please, reach out to them and see how you can think about testing some of these things out. I'm a big advocate of testing when we don't necessarily have the case study or the answer, and maybe we'll be who you will be who we point to in the future to say this is the way to do it.
I think we have time for one more from Brooke. Do message ads or conversation ads tend to have higher CTRs? The execution is very similar outside of the multiple CTAs in the conversation ads.
Yeah, it's a great question. Conversation ads, while they've probably been with us now for a little over a year, are still, relatively new compared to our message ad suite. What I've seen in education, which I think is really interesting, and I'll certainly defer to my colleagues to talk about this as well, is I've seen conversation ads play really differently depending on the audience. And I've done a lot of testing here around message ads versus conversation ads. And for some programs, I've seen, CPLs 50% less on conversation ads than message ads. And for some programs, I've actually seen the message ad resonate a little bit more. So again, it's one of those things that I'm constantly telling my partners to test, and we're constantly looking at and pulling different levers. Something I really like about our conversation ads is that you can actually see that flow chart of what CTAs our members are clicking on and how they're interacting. So if you have conversation ads running, I'd encourage you not just to look at that CTR, but also that breakdown of what CTAs your members are engaging with, and start making tweaks based on that. I've seen some really interesting metrics. I've done some interesting analysis around what buttons our members are more likely to click on. And I tend to see that when you're telling the member they're going to get more information, or they're going to kind of get something in return from clicking on that CTA, you get a lot more engagement and interaction than if you just have a like, yes, no, a more definitive answer. But I definitely see some program variation here, and I'm still kind of figuring out what the patterns look like, but it's definitely a place I would test. The one thing I would also just recommend or make sure everyone's aware of, conversation ads and message ads, they take the same space in a member's inbox. So make sure that when you are testing these out, you kind of come to a finite conclusion of which one's working better, because they don't compete in our auction, but they'll compete to get into the auction if you're running against the same audience. So, do that testing and then kind of make a decision about which way you're going to go. But I think it could definitely be program dependent.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. Looks as if we're at time. Definitely appreciate all the questions, and to my co-hosts, Bridget, Naomi, and Marley. We all appreciate y'all, and please reach out to your team for any questions. And yeah, we look forward to seeing all our brands on our platform with message ads.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Care.